All right, this is my rules overview video for High Frontier. This is going to be a quick overview of the basic idea of the game so that you have some orientation and sense of what's going on for when you sit down to play it. This is not a comprehensive rules video. Those exist on the internet. You can go watch one if you want, or you can read all 50 pages of the core rules. But if all you want to do is sit down and be comfortable and ready to get started quicker, this should help you without killing too much of your time. So High Frontier is a board game with a board. The board looks like that. And it is about space and flying around in space and building factories in space. This is a theoretical near future, grounded hard sci-fi economic simulator thingy using somewhat kind of sort of real science inspired tech, sort of kind of. And it's pretty cool. It's also a game where your rocket can blow up because you rolled a 1 on a 6-sided die. Thankfully, there's a lot you can do about that. But it is capricious. It is very cruel. It is more interesting than it is fun. So be ready for that. You probably won't have much fun. But hopefully you'll come away being like, that was kind of cool. And after 10-ish games, this thing really opens up and becomes deeply fascinating. So maybe go play the digital version sometime. Anyway, so it's a board game. What can you do in the board game? Here's a list of all the actions. And you already don't want to play, right? Okay, let's make this simpler. In High Frontier, players take turns. After, quick math, 48 turns, the game ends. So you get to do about 48 of these actions, right? To start the game, you do not have a rocket in space. You're just chilling on Earth trying to get off the ground. And before you go into space, there's only 4 things you can do. Everything else opens up later. So before you're in space, High Frontier is a card game in which you are bidding on cards and trying to put cards into space using 4 simple actions. Income gives you 1 money. It's terrible. Auction starts a card auction. It's good. Free market sells a card that you already bought. Gets you more money than income, typically. So income's kind of a bad action unless you're desperate. Most of the game lives here. Research, free market, back and forth. And once you've got a rocket that you're confident in, or parts of a rocket that you don't want in your hand anymore, you can boost those to get them out of your hand and into space. When you have enough cards in space, you can start flying. On your turn, you get 1 operation and 1 movement. The movement doesn't really matter until you've got something in space. So until then, you're going to be playing a card game. Here's what the card game looks like. These are the 6 decks of cards. There's about 12 cards in each deck, and they're on the table face up for everybody to see. This is the market, and on your turn as an operation, if you want to start an auction, which you very often do, you're going to come to the market and pick a card that you want to sell. As a quick, simple example, I'll take this thruster. I want to sell this. And we go around the table bidding on this. 1, 2, 3, pass, pass, pass. Person who bids the most gets it. The person who started the auction gets the money. But it's not just an auction for this card. Probably the most interesting rule here is that this box here is the cards that need to support this card. And so when I start an auction, I actually, for free, get to bring along 1 of each card that supports this card, or is needed to support it, into the auction. So this is actually an auction for 2 cards. If I were to auction off this thruster, it needs a reactor and a radiator, so we'd be auctioning 3 cards at once. So the auction goes around, this sells for 4, somebody takes that, I get 4 money, whatever, right? When you buy cards from an auction, they go into your hand. You have no hand size limit, but once you are holding 4 or more cards, you can no longer bid in auctions. So it's kind of hard to get more once you're at 4 or higher. So I might bid in this auction, get myself a thruster, reactor. Next auction comes up for a Robonaut. I win that one too. Now my hand's at 4 cards. I can't win more cards. I have to get cards out of my hand if I want to keep auctioning. So I can do 1 of 2 things. Either I can take the worst card in my hand that I don't want and sell it. That's a free market action on my turn. It goes to the bottom of the deck. It's gone. I get a ton of money. Or I could take the good cards in my hand that I'm confident in, like this thruster that is supported by this reactor. They seem to work well together. Let's take those and boost them into low Earth orbit. I would total up the mass of all the cards I want to boost. This is 2 total. I pay 2, and these get thrown on my board in the low Earth orbit stack as part of the rocket that I'm building. So I'm just going to stack cards here until I have a functioning rocket, and then I get to fly. My hand's now down to 1 card. That's awesome. I can get back into the auctions and grab another card. I can grab another card. Cards going around the table, whatever. That's the card play, right? It is entirely auction driven, so you're always able to interact with other people. You can sell good cards and try to rake in money through doing that. You can just amass a huge hand of cards and just sell them every turn to try to eke out profit that way. You'll play a solid hour of this card game before you do anything else, unless you're using the jumpstart rules, which we probably will in at least our next game, just to get started a little quicker. There will still be card play with jumpstart rules, but jumpstart hands you like 6 or 7 cards to start the game off, so you can actually start flying on the board, which is what everybody wants to do. So how do you fly on the board? Well, we're not to the board yet. We'll get there. We're almost there. To actually understand flying, you need to know how your player board works. This board gives you what's called the fuel strip and a diagram of a thrust triangle. So this explains how rockets work. And once this makes sense, the board starts to make sense. So let's say I have a rocket. This is a horrible fake example rocket. Don't judge me. This is not real. This would never be real. But this is a rocket. It is almost legal. If I throw a radiator on here, I think this is a functioning rocket. My thruster is supported. It works. Everything's good to go. So this rocket is ready to fly. And to set it up on my player board, I'm going to take every component in the rocket and total their mass 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and track that as this rocket's dry mass on the black numbers on this track. 12, pretty heavy. Dry mass represents mass of my rocket with no fuel loaded. I then have to fuel it using wet mass every time I load in a aqua, which is a gallon of water in low Earth orbit, or 1 ton of water, I think, into the rocket, which is money that I'm having to pay to fuel up my rocket. I get to go up 1 step on this track, right? And that's me fueling. The distance between wet and dry is how much fuel is in my rocket, right? Once I'm out in space, I will be burning this fuel in order to actually move around. So the more fuel I can start by taking with me, the further I can go. Right? This rocket's fairly heavy because it's a fake, dumb example rocket. But hypothetically, imagining that I was flying something a little lighter, let's say my dry mass was all the way down at 4. That's very hard to pull off, but it is possible. And I fueled that 4 with maybe 5 tanks of fuel, and we're all the way up there. Now let's imagine we're flying a rocket with this thrust triangle. Right, we're going to use this as a simple example. I do have one on my rocket, but it's kind of hellishly inefficient. So it'd make this example weird. Also, I have a thrust modifier. We're not getting into that right now. So let's just use this as my example. Okay, this diagrams how the thruster that powers my rocket works. The most important numbers are the pink and the blue one. Pink is base thrust, which is how many burns this thruster can make per turn. It doesn't really have to be that high to get me around space pretty quickly. Even 3 or 4 is pretty good. Base thrust also determines what you can land and lift off of, though. So without a strong thruster, you're not getting on, say, Mars or the moon very easily, but you can get on and off of asteroids without a very strong thruster. So I take my base thrust and I start off tracking that with this rocket. So that's my base thrust of 5. There are modifiers to base thrust. If my rocket's pretty lightweight, I get a +1 modifier to my net thrust, so I might get a modifier from that. Afterburns also allow you to modify your thrust. We're not getting into that. I don't need it right now. So I've got my thrust set up. I know I've got a thrust of 6. I could burn 6 times this turn flying around, and I could lift off or land on spaces size 6 or lower. But to actually move around the map, anytime I have to execute a burn, and we'll get to what burns are when we see the map, I would take this wet fuel marker and slide it down a number of spaces on my fuel track equal to my consumption. Fuel consumption is probably the most important number in the whole game, at least for starting. So every time I burn on the map, I go here and take a single step down following the black line. That is 1 burn. Using this thruster, that's 1 fuel consumption. I slide it down by 1, done. I'd take another burn somewhere else on the map. I slide it down by 1 more. Notice that fuel gets more and more efficient the lighter your rocket is. A very lightweight rocket has a bunch of like intermediate steps in the fuel track to make the fuel a lot more efficient and go further. And your fuel gets much less efficient the heavier your rocket is, until you're burning like 2 units of fuel just to go 1 burn. It's kind of awful. Also, 1 fuel consumption is actually kind of rare. This thruster that we bought earlier has a consumption of 5, which means just to burn a single time to kind of get away from Earth, I'd be going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then again, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I'm already out of fuel, right? Early game rockets are really inefficient and can be very expensive and can be very heavy. Building an effective rocket is extremely difficult. That's half the fun of the game, is how hard this actually is to get going. It can take you multiple real-life hours to build your first functional rocket that can actually go do something. As far as what we're trying to do, we're about to need to go to the map. But before we do that, we're going to look at one important thing on cards. The thing that lets you interact with the map is a card called a Robonaut, which is a robotic mining platform thing. And in the corner, your Robonaut has some stats. Icon doesn't matter right now, but the number matters a lot. The lower number on your Robonaut, the more sites in space you're able to prospect from. This number will interact with hydration on the map. It is extremely important. A 1 is unbelievably powerful. You'll pretty much never see a 1. A 2 is very strong. A 3 is more typical, and a 4 is pretty weak. And that number affects mission planning more than anything else. This tells me where I can and can't go. So knowing this number before I go to the map, really important. I have an ISRU of 2. So I'm going to keep that in mind as we look at the map. So here's the map. This is how mission planning works. This is how movement works. This is how the whole game works. The map is the thing that makes this game so interesting. And just quickly for reference, for your own reference, this whole thing we're looking at used to be an expansion. Really does not matter for the base game. You will almost never go out here. It is incredibly prohibitive, expensive, unrealistic until you have such things as freighters and gigawatt thrusters. So really we're playing on this half of the map. And realistically, we are playing in this band specifically. This blue one is the asteroid belt just past Mars, where all the really cool sites are. You're going to spend a lot of time staring at these hexagons, trying to decide which of them you want to fly to. Or you can get distracted by the more popular destinations closer in, such as Mars, which is a terrible place to go for tons of reasons. The moon, also a terrible place to go. Mercury, which is just hellishly prohibitively hard to get to. And other fun places. So let's talk about how you move around this place. You start on Earth, no surprise. Everything in the world starts in Leo, low Earth orbit. When you boost a card from your hand to Leo, it lives here. When you place a rocket on the map to get started moving, it'll start here. And then you need to move out of Leo by following the Rainbow Bridge to Cycler. You'll fly through the radiation belts and then off on your choice of path. These are orbital trajectories that will take you to whatever destination you want to get to, right? To move on the map, you'll use your movement for the turn. You have 1 per turn. You can go as far as your rocket's thrust allows, right? Our previous rocket had a net thrust of like 6, so I can go 6 burns. Every circle on the map is a space, and any pink circle requires that I spend a burn to move into it. So I could take my rocket from Leo to Cycler by spending a burn. I'm now in Cycler. I can keep moving. I could fly through radiation to Solar Earth Lagrange. That takes another burn. And maybe I decide I want to go to Mercury. I'm going to follow this orange line. It's helpfully signposted to give me the shortest path from Earth. So I can just follow that. An empty circle doesn't take a burn, so I can just go there for free. You go here for free, go through some more radiation, and then into this horrible death spiral of burns that's me slowing all the way down so that I can actually land on Mercury. Or maybe speeding all the way up. I don't know. Is Mercury moving faster than Earth? Probably, because it's closer. I have no idea. But we're matching speed with Mercury, so we've got to spend a whole bunch of delta V before we hit this lander burn that lets us land on Mercury. A more realistic early game mission would actually be this one out to somewhere like Lutetia in the asteroid belt, where I'd start in Leo, fly through Cycler, SSO, and then start drifting out here through Few Lagrange and go way off the map into our nice fun region where all the good destinations are, right? So again, to do that, we're spending burns anytime we move into a pink circle. We can stop anytime we want. We can keep moving if we're on a circle. We cannot stop on a line. We just kind of drift on it until we hit the next destination, but we can stop on intersections. So we come out to this part of the map. There's a bunch of these places where the lines overlap. These are also spaces you can stop. And then on your next turn, you could choose any direction to leave this intersection from, right? So if I want to redirect from this path I'm taking, I could stop for my turn right here, wait a year, and then head off in this direction without having to spend any fuel. If you're in a hurry and you want to redirect on an intersection, that's called a pivot. It costs 2 burns, but you can do that, or you can just sit and wait a year, and next year it's free. Okay. As far as where you're trying to go, every black hexagon on this map is an object you could land on, and each of them has some stats. We're going to use this one as an example. Hello, Fortuna. There's 3 stats on an asteroid that really matter early game. There's also things like space plants and little other fun features on these things, but what really matters is the size, hydration, and type. Size, kind of like the name implies, is about how big this thing is. Bigger is heavier, bigger is harder to land on, bigger is more likely to contain useful minerals. Bigger is better, usually, but also harder. Hydration is likelihood that this site contains hydrated minerals, which is the thing that we are prospecting for in the early game. More water is better. When we are mission planning, if you remember my Robonaut from earlier, I need to have a Robonaut rating, a prospector rating, an ISRU rating, equal to or lower than the site hydration in order to prospect it. So for a 2 hydration site, I need a 2 or a 1 on my Robonaut. For a 3 hydration site, I need a 3, 2, or a 1. You'll notice there's no hydration close to the sun because everything's getting baked. The most hydrated site is Mars, which makes it really exciting because it's easy, right? Tons of hydration. We could prospect that sucker, no problem. The problem is the site size is 10, so the fuel required to lift off and land there is hellish, and actually building a factory there doesn't help you as much, theoretically, as having one on a smaller site where you can lift off and land more easily. The only problem is how prospecting works. Let's say I showed up here with that Robonaut from earlier. You remember it was a 2 in its prospecting. I would land here, I would compare my 2 to the 2 hydration, go, yay, I can prospect this. I take a prospect action. I'm now rolling a d6 trying to hit this number or lower, right? Site size. So on a size 5 site, I have a 5 in 6 chance of prospecting successfully. On a size 3 site, I have a 50-50 chance. On a size 1 site, I'm probably not making it, right? If you fail your prospecting roll, you bust this site permanently for all players and it can never become a factory. If you nail it, you get a claim there, which lets you put up a factory later through the industrialize action. If you bring a big enough rocket, you could do it pretty much automatically. And a factory is what opens the game up. A factory is what gets you victory points. There's a tracker up here telling you how much victory points your factory is worth, depending on what type of site it's placed on. Building factories is most of the point of the game. So in the early game, I'm thinking about mission planning. I'm trying to find sites I'm capable of prospecting using my Robonaut. This one I could do because I have 2. These I could not do because because 1 hydration is too low for my 2 Robonaut, but maybe I could try this place. Maybe I could try this Comet, but it's a size 1 site, so it's pretty risky and unlikely I'd actually land it. There's a bunch of 1s over here I could go for, but again, pretty risky, and so on and so forth. And that's how decision-making and mission planning kind of sort of works in High Frontier. The basic flow of the game is we're going to play a card game on Earth for a while we build rockets. We're going to throw those rockets in Leo, spend a whole ton of fuel pushing them all the way out to a promising site, probably in the asteroid belt, maybe Mars if you're a sucker. You roll some dice really hoping to land a prospect. If you do, you make a claim, you bring some stuff from Earth, you whack a factory down, A factory gets you a whole ton of points and opens up the second half of the game that we're not getting into right now, but basically allows you to produce higher tech cards in space, cheaper, for free. Start building independence from Earth so you don't have to go back home so often. This gets into advanced mission planning, where now you're planning a mission starting from your asteroid, maybe jumping even deeper into space, and that hardly uses any fuel because you already got out of Earth, which is the hard part. Once you're in space, moving around is super easy, and you can start doing much more fun mission planning and other sorts of advanced nonsense. That's the second half of the game. Usually you get about 10 turns of that stuff before the game wraps up. A couple of factories, maybe 3 factories, is a pretty successful first game of High Frontier. But the game can get hellishly complicated and much, much longer if you start adding expansions, so I'm not going to make promises like that. But for your first game, that's about what it's going to feel like. You're going to play a card game on Earth for a while, boost a rocket, fly around, roll some dice, hope to get lucky, land a claim, build a factory, build some advanced tech, fly some advanced missions, build another factory, maybe 2, and the game will end and you'll tell stories about how cool you were. So that's it. See you Friday.